Hi, and welcome to our lesson. In this lesson, we'll talk about tools that you can use to help assess risk at your firm. We'll talk about both qualitative and quantitative methods. An example of a qualitative method is risk ranking. This is the process by which a firm identifies the risk events it might face and then ranks them in order of importance. This helps a firm know where to manage its resources, where should it deploy its capital, where should it tell its employees to focus. By ranking the risks, the firm knows what the priority is. This is related to a similar concept of risk maps. Risk maps are simply a tool that allows the risk ranking to kind of be sorted. Let's look at an example to help understand what I mean by this. This is an example of a risk map. Now, you see that we've used colors on this one. There's no right or wrong way to put these together. This is simply an example. In this risk map, we've used colors to signal the ranking or priority of the risk. You'll notice in box number 9, it's red. It requires the firm's commitment and attention. It's actively monitored, and any deviations are reported to the audit committee. This clearly is an important risk event. Contrast that with box 1. Box 1 is a green event. It requires simply high-level monitoring to note any changes in the variability of that event. Now, what the events are will be specific to the firm, but this is simply a tool that you can use to help direct people's attention to the most important risks that your firm faces. Next, let's turn to some quantitative methods. The first one is looking at the distribution of earnings. We've talked about this before in the concept of risk, that there's volatility. When there's volatility, firms are not able to forecast as well into the future. Firms really care about how much they make, their earnings per share. As they project their earnings per share in the future, if it's more volatile, it can be more difficult to predict. So mapping out the distribution of earnings can be informative to a firm. Next, we talk about earnings at risk. What this concept means is the firm engages in a what-if scenario. If this event happens, what will happen to our earnings? For example, if a division is struggling and the firm decides, well, we may lose that division and need to close it, how will that affect our future earnings? Or the firm might think of a political risk. What if there's a new legislation that might be passed? How will that new legislation affect our revenues or expenses and ultimately our earnings? Firms want to consider how much of their earnings are at risk due to the variety of risk factors. This is related to the concept of a sensitivity analysis, which a firm uses to gauge how sensitive their earnings, or it could be their costs, their revenue, whatever the firm is trying to predict, they'll want to know how sensitive their predictions are. This is where you want to challenge your assumptions and think through, what if my assumptions change due to a risk event? Sensitivity analysis allows you to map out all of the different variations that could affect your outcome. Next, we have a specific concept called value at risk. Now, you'll want to note that you don't need to do calculations of this on the CMA exam, but you do need to know what it means conceptually. Value at risk applies to firms that engage in trading activities. And what value at risk tells them is what's the potential loss the firm may incur if there's a drop in the market. Firms want to use this as a tracking measure. By itself, it doesn't mean much. But over time, as a tracking measure, it tells the firm, are they engaging in more risky positions or less risky positions? That's the concept of value at risk. In this lesson, we've talked about a few qualitative and quantitative methods. You'll usually want to use both methods to help you ascertain the risks your firm might be exposed to and how you can most actively manage those risks.